Welcome to Survey and Beyond, the data collection podcast by SurveyCTO. We share expert insights and practical tips on data collection and analysis, discuss innovative methods and tools to enhance data quality and security, and demystify complex data concepts to help people collecting data all around the world. I'm your host, Marta Costa. Part of what goes into great surveys is having great survey questions. If you have a good question, you can draw more accurate and reliable conclusions. And because of this, last year in December, we asked over 700 SurveyCTO users what is one question you have about writing great survey questions. And today, on this episode of Survey and Beyond, we are not only going to share the most common questions and themes that came up in our survey, but we are also going to answer them. You might be having similar questions or you might be dealing with similar challenges, so we try to create these episodes to be relevant to different types of organizations and workflows. Let's jump right into these questions. Hello, and welcome to the Writing Great Survey Questions episode of Survey and Beyond. The first question is, how can researchers ensure that their questions are unbiased and do not lead respondents towards a particular answer? This is such an important question because bias is one of the biggest issues in survey data quality. And there are many different types of bias that are not directly related to questions designed, but are still important, like sampling bias, for example, which is when your pool of respondents doesn't adequately represent the demographics of people you are trying to understand better through your survey. But when it comes to bias in question design and phrasing, there are a number of best practices that you can follow to avoid it. The first one is keep your personal opinions out of questions. Don't say that something is good or bad. Don't make recommendations. Don't indicate that one answer is what you think people should be doing. Avoid using words that are too descriptive or that might imply a belief, since these two can introduce bias. So let's see an example. Instead of asking a question like, did you protect yourself against serious illness by completing all of your antibiotics as recommended by medical organizations? You can phrase the question in a different way, like this. Please indicate how many days you took the following antibiotics and provide choices for respondents to select. In the first example, the use of the word serious or the expression as recommended can both imply that you, as the survey provider, have a certain perspective, which can sway how respondents answer your question and ultimately color your conclusions. The second one is be simple and specific in your language. Questions should be simple, direct, and to the point. The goal is for respondents to understand what you mean. Don't use overly descriptive language or difficult words. It's a survey, not an essay contest. This is especially important if there are any possible language barriers in your respondent sample. And finally, one topic, one question. Don't try to get multiple pieces of information out of one question. Avoid phrasing questions or answer choices in ways that introduce multiple possibilities. Instead, make sure that each question and each option is distinct. The second question is, how do you make sure questions are understood well across cultures, especially for companies and organizations that work globally? And this is very relevant for many SurveyCTO users, but also other organizations that work in impact-driven sectors. I would say that just avoiding the practices that we just mentioned about avoiding bias is a great place to start. But there are many other recommendations that you can follow. An important one is to consult with local people, such as your enumerators or other local stakeholders on the ground. There is really no substitute for a genuine local perspective on your questions. And if you are fortunate enough to hire local enumerators, you should not wait until the pilot to engage them in your work. Have a number of them to review your survey questions and offer their perspective. Does it make sense to them? Do they think it would make sense to their family or neighbors? Do they have any suggestions? Are any topics culturally sensitive in ways that you weren't aware of? But also, be aware of language and word association that are different from yours. For example, Americans like to use the word love to describe their feelings for everything, from their spouse, their pet, their favorite food, and favorite activity. But other countries or cultures might find that the word love, including the most common translations for it, has a more specific meaning, and words like enjoy or like would be a better fit in many contexts. Finally, don't use culturally specific examples. Other cultures have different histories and practices, so things that might be common knowledge in your own culture are not necessarily well known elsewhere. If you want to use, say, a famous person to illustrate a concept in a question, consider referring to someone from the culture you are serving instead of assuming they are as familiar as you with their local cultural icons. The third question is how to avoid survey fatigue and engage respondents. And to get accurate survey data, it is important that your respondents are completing your survey while being mentally engaged in all questions. And there are a few things you can do when writing your questions to promote this. The first one might feel a bit obvious, but it is actually really key, which is keep the survey as short as possible. Making sure that you are only asking the questions you absolutely need the answers to is quite important and a good practice for both data quality and data security. In general, you should also keep questions brief and to the point. And we already touched on keeping language simple in the previous question, but it is also worth calling out that shorter questions are generally good practice. And this is not always possible because you need to make sure that respondents really understand your question. But if you can be as clearly with fewer words, then you should. You should also mix things up. Instead of having the exact same type of question multiple times, for example, rank this category from 1 to 10 and repeat it for multiple categories, try to add a bit of variety. Try to mix ranking questions with open-ended questions and with Likert scale questions, for example. You should also use skip logic, also known as relevance in the case of SurveyCTO, which is a survey practice of asking questions to respondents based on previous answers. And this is usually a data quality best practice because you are only asking the questions that are really relevant to respondents. So for example, instead of asking, please rank your satisfaction with the local health clinic, you can first ask, when was the last time you went to the local health clinic? And only ask the satisfaction question to those that have been to the local health clinic in the past 6 months, for example. And finally, style your questions. This is especially important for respondents that are completing the survey themselves, which is the case of web forms, for example. And in this case, you should consider the looks and the interactivity of your questions. You can always change the font size, the font colors. You can add image, audio, or video, but you can also customize your questions to be more interactive, like clickable images. Those are all the responses on writing great survey questions that we have time to cover today. We hope you learned a few new tips or tricks that you can keep in mind in future projects. If you are a community user who responded to this survey, we want to give you a special shout out to helping us determine what would be most helpful to our listeners. To everyone else, thank you for tuning in. If you want more survey research and data collection best practices, subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. Thank you, and see you next time. Survey and Beyond, the data collection podcast, is brought to you by SurveyCTO. To find out more about SurveyCTO and how it ensures reliable, secure, and scalable data collection, visit www.surveycto.com. And make sure to search for Survey and Beyond, the data collection podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at SurveyCTO, thanks for listening.